the scars remained. From the viewport of Vanguard's command shuttle, Captain Elias Rourke could see them clearly. Vast fissures in the landscape, blackened craters where defense platforms had once stood, forests half-toppled like fallen soldiers. But it was the smoking wreckage that drew his eye, that twisted his heart, with equal measures of dread and determination. The Odyssey, the colonial vessel, lay broken across the eastern foothills, its once proud hull split open like a fallen seed pod. 50,000 souls had been aboard when Solace's defensive platform had struck the fatal blow. Not all could have perished. The ships were built to withstand catastrophe, compartmentalized, reinforced, designed with the harsh realities of space in mind. There would be survivors. There had to be. "Final approach to designated landing zone, Captain," the pilot announced, voice tight with the same emotion Rourke felt clawing at his throat. "Acknowledged." Rourke forced himself to look away from the Odyssey's remains, focusing instead on the peninsula below. It stretched before them like a crooked finger jutting into a vast turquoise sea. At its base rose the mountain, untouched by the devastation that surrounded it. He had chosen this spot carefully, defendable with access to both fresh water and ocean resources, positioned along the equator for optimal growing conditions. But more importantly, it offered the closest viable landing site to the Odyssey crash. "How long until we can launch rescue operations?" he asked, not bothering to hide the urgency in his voice. Lieutenant Cattleman consulted his tablet. "The primary medical modules can be operational within 4 hours of landing. Rescue teams are already assembled and equipped. Search drones are prepped for immediate deployment once we're on the ground." "Not good enough," Rourke said flatly. "I want drones in the air the moment we touch down. Medical triage units should be ready to deploy within 2 hours, not 4. "Yes, sir," Cattleman replied without hesitation. "I'll inform the teams." Through the opposite viewport, Rourke could see the other ships, Endeavor, Hope's Calling, and New Dawn, each tracing their own careful paths toward the peninsula. In the distance, barely visible through a bank of clouds, the Sentinel made its approach toward the nearby island. 5 ships had left Earth. 4 would land as planned. The 5th would need their help. "Touching down in 2 minutes, Captain," the pilot announced. "All systems nominal." Rourke felt the familiar weight of command settle onto his shoulders. 200,000 colonists across the remaining fleet, all looking to him for guidance, for hope. And now 50,000 more whose lives hung in the balance. "Very well," he replied. "Begin landing sequence." The shuttle shuddered as it pierced the lower atmosphere, the hull glowing faintly with friction heat. Below, the landing site grew more distinct, a wide, flat plain at the mountain's base, bordered by dense forest on one side and steep cliffs on the other. A river cut through the terrain, emptying into the sea beyond. The shuttle's landing gear deployed with a mechanical groan. Impact dampeners hummed to life. The ground rushed up to meet them, and then... Contact. "Landing successful, Captain," the pilot reported, powering down the engines. "We are on the ground." Rourke was already unbuckling his harness. "Launch the search drones. I want eyes on the Odyssey crash site immediately." The command center was chaos. Organized, purposeful chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Rourke stood at the central holographic display, watching as real-time drone footage streamed in from the Odyssey crash site. The images confirmed his hopes and fears: significant structural damage, but intact compartments. Signs of movement, emergency beacons active in multiple sections, life signs detected in sectors 3, 7, and 11, reported Dr. Elaine Karras, the colony's chief biologist, temporarily reassigned to the rescue operation. Environmental systems still functioning in those areas, but power is failing. They have hours, not days. Rourke nodded grimly. "What about the approach? Can we get rescue craft close enough?" The tactical officer, Commander Hayes, manipulated the hologram, highlighting a ravine cutting through the foothills. "This offers the most direct route to the largest intact section. Terrain is rough but navigable for our heavy transport vehicles. The main challenge will be extracting survivors from the ship itself." "We'll need cutting equipment," Rourke decided, and structural supports to prevent further collapse during extraction. He turned to the communications officer. Status of the other colonies? All 4 remaining ships report successful landings, sir. Endeavor, Hope's Calling, and New Dawn are establishing emergency response teams as we speak. Sentinel is launching additional search drones from the island. Good. Rourke studied the holographic map where the 4 colony sites glowed like beacons around the central mountain, with the Odyssey crash site marked in pulsing red approximately 30 kilometers to the east. We'll coordinate a joint rescue operation. Each colony provides personnel and equipment based on proximity and resources. He began assigning roles with rapid-fire precision. Vanguard will lead the primary extraction teams. We're closest and have the most medical personnel. Endeavor provides transportation and additional medical support. Hope's Calling handles logistics and supply chains. New Dawn manages communications and coordinates with Sentinel for aerial reconnaissance. No one questioned the orders. With 50,000 lives at stake, colonial rivalries and political posturing were set aside. This wasn't just about saving lives. It was about proving that humanity could survive here, that they could overcome the first real crisis on their new home. First teams deploy in 30 minutes, Rourke announced. I'll be going with them. Lieutenant Cattleman stepped forward. Sir, with respect, you're needed here to coordinate the overall operation. The colony is barely established. The colony can manage without me for a few hours, Rourke cut him off. These people fought alongside us against Solace. I won't sit in a command center while they're trapped and dying. Cattleman knew better than to argue further. Yes, sir. I'll prepare your equipment. As the command center personnel dispersed to their tasks, Dr. Karras approached Rourke. The initial colony setup will have to be delayed, she said. We're diverting almost all resources to the rescue. The colonies can wait, Rourke replied. People can't. She nodded, but concern creased her brow. We should also be conducting environmental analysis before we expose thousands of civilians to this world. The air seems breathable, the water drinkable, but without proper testing. The preliminary scans show no immediate dangers, Rourke said, and we have 50,000 people who don't have the luxury of waiting for comprehensive analysis. We adapt, Doctor. We always have. 28 minutes later, Rourke stood at the loading bay of a heavy transport vehicle, watching as rescue teams filed aboard. Each person carried specialized equipment: medical kits, cutting tools, portable stretchers, communications gear. Their faces were set with determination, their movements efficient and precise. These weren't soldiers anymore, Rourke realized, nor were they colonists. Not yet. They were something in between. People who had fought a war and now sought to build a peace. People who understood that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant staying human. The convoy set out as the alien sun reached its zenith, a line of vehicles cutting through pristine wilderness toward tragedy. Rourke rode in the lead transport, studying updated drone footage as it came in. The situation at the crash site was deteriorating. Power failures in 2 more sections, structural integrity compromised in a 3rd. They needed to move faster. Can these things go any quicker? He asked the driver. Not without risking damage that would stop us completely, sir, came the reply. The terrain gets worse ahead. Rourke nodded, forcing himself to be patient. Rushing wouldn't save lives if the rescue teams never arrived. The journey took nearly 2 hours. 2 hours of jolting progress through dense forest and rocky outcroppings. When they finally crested the last ridge and the Odyssey came into full view, a hush fell over the transport. The colonial vessel's graceful form was now a twisted ruin. Its hull, designed to house and protect 50,000 souls across the void between stars, lay broken and burning. Debris was scattered across kilometers of landscape. Yet amid the destruction, intact sections remained, testament to the engineers who had designed these ships to withstand the unthinkable. "Move in," Rourke ordered. "Establish the forward command post at these coordinates." The rescue operation unfolded with methodical urgency. Teams deployed to the most viable entry points, portable scanners probing for life signs, cutting equipment carving paths through mangled metal. Medical units set up triage centers at the perimeter ready to receive survivors. Rourke moved between teams, offering guidance where needed, encouragement where required. He helped extract a family from a half-crushed habitation module, carried a child to the medical tents, held the hand of an engineer as medics worked to stabilize a punctured lung. Hours passed. The alien sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the wreckage. More vehicles arrived from the other colonies, additional medical personnel from Endeavor, engineering teams from Hope's Calling, communications specialists from New Dawn. Even Sentinel, despite its island isolation, contributed a team of drone operators who provided crucial views of otherwise inaccessible areas. By nightfall, they had reached 3 of the ship's main population centers. Nearly 5,000 survivors had been extracted, some walking under their own power, others carried on stretchers. Too many covered with sheets. The temporary medical facilities were overflowing. Every transport vehicle was repurposed for evacuating the wounded to the colonial sites. Rourke stood at the edge of the forward command post, watching as floodlights illuminated the ongoing work. His uniform was stained with blood and soot, his face etched with exhaustion. But he refused to leave. Dr. Karras found him there, offering a canteen of water. "You need rest, Captain. You've been at this for 16 hours straight." He accepted the water but shook his head. "We've barely scratched the surface. There are still tens of thousands unaccounted for." "And we'll find them," she assured him. "But the rescue will take days, not hours. You can't personally save everyone." Before he could respond, a commotion erupted at the nearest entry point. Rescuers were emerging, supporting a figure whose uniform marked her as part of the Odyssey's command crew. "Captain," someone shouted, "it's Captain Duvall." Rourke moved quickly toward the group. Captain Maya Duvall, commander of the Odyssey, was alive, bloodied, one arm clearly broken but conscious and alert. Her eyes found his as he approached. "Rourke," she managed, her voice hoarse. "You came." "Of course we came," he replied, helping to lower her onto a medical cot. "We wouldn't leave you." She gripped his arm with surprising strength. "Cryo Bay 4 and 5 are intact," she said urgently. "Life support holding, 30,000 still in suspension." Rourke's heart leaped. The cryo bays, where colonists spent the long journey between stars in suspended animation. If 2 were intact with functioning systems, then the majority of the Odyssey's people might still be saved. "Show me," he demanded, calling for a tablet. One of the technicians pulled up the ship's schematics and Duvall indicated the location of the cryobays, buried deep within the most heavily protected section of the vessel. "We detected those areas," said one of the engineers, "but access is completely cut off by collapsed sections here, here, and here." He pointed to 3 separate blockages. "Then we make new access points," Rourke decided. "Bring in the heavy cutting equipment. We'll go through the outer hull if we have to." Captain Duvall nodded weakly. "There's a maintenance shaft, section 42B, less reinforced, might be faster." As medics moved in to treat Duvall's injuries, Rourke reorganized the rescue teams. New priorities, new approaches. If they could reach those cryo bays, the death toll would fall from potentially tens of thousands to mere hundreds. A tragedy still, but not the catastrophe they had feared. Work continued through the night. Transport vessels shuttled between the crash site and the colonies, carrying survivors, equipment, and relief personnel. The colonies themselves, barely established, still more concept than reality, transformed into massive field hospitals and refugee centers. Rourke finally allowed himself to be relieved shortly before dawn, extracting a promise from Lieutenant Cattleman to wake him immediately if they breached the cryobays or if any significant developments occurred. He collapsed onto a cot in one of the temporary shelters, asleep almost instantly. He dreamed of Earth, not the overcrowded, resource-depleted Earth they had left behind, but the Earth of legend, green and vibrant, welcoming. In the dream, he walked through forests and fields, each step bringing him closer to some undefined destination. When he reached a riverbank, he looked down to see his reflection, but the water showed not his face, but the broken hull of the Odyssey. Cattleman woke him 3 hours later. "Sir?" They've reached Cryo Bay 4. The maintenance shaft Duval had identified proved to be their salvation. Engineering teams had cleared a narrow path to Cryo Bay 4, where environmental systems remained operational and nearly 15,000 colonists lay in suspended animation, unaware of the catastrophe that had befallen their ship. When Rourke arrived at the access point, the technical teams were already working to establish stable power connections to maintain the cryosystems. "Status?" he demanded. "Power reserves at 37%, reported the lead engineer. "We've established external connections, but the transfer is delicate. One wrong surge and we could lose the whole bay." "How long to evacuation?" "At least 2 days to safely move all 15,000. We need to prep each suspension pod for transfer, establish receiving facilities at the colonies, ensure we have enough power to maintain stasis during transport." Rourke nodded. It was painstaking work, but they had no choice. A failure here would mean 15,000 deaths in an instant. "And Cryo Bay 5, still working on access. The route is more compromised, but we expect breakthrough within hours." For 3 days, the rescue operation consumed every resource the colonies could spare. The initial landing sites, chosen for strategic value and resource access, became impromptu cities of tents and prefabricated structures. Colonies who had expected to build a new world found themselves instead building hospitals, establishing supply chains, creating systems to track and house refugees. The Leadership Council, comprising the 5 ship captains, including Duval, once her injuries were stabilized, met twice daily to coordinate efforts. Political differences and territorial concerns were set aside in the face of immediate need. By the 4th day, they had successfully evacuated both cryobays. 30,000 colonists remained in suspension, distributed among the 5 colony sites according to medical capacity and resource availability. Another 8,000 survivors from the active crew and early awakened colonists were receiving treatment or had been assigned temporary housing. The final death toll stood at just over 12,000, a devastating number, but far fewer than they had initially feared. On the 5th day, as the rescue operations began to wind down and the focus shifted to recovery and integration, Rourke stood on a ridge overlooking Vanguard Colony. What had been planned as an orderly establishment of humanity's new home had become a sprawling, chaotic encampment. Tents and temporary structures spread outward from the original landing site like ripples on water. People moved with purpose but also with a wariness that spoke of trauma and uncertainty. Yet amid the disorder he saw something else, something unexpected. Colonists from different ships working side by side, sharing resources, supporting one another. The artificial divisions of vessel assignment were blurring, replaced by a simpler identity: survivors. Dr. Karras joined him on the ridge, carrying 2 steaming cups of what passed for coffee in their current circumstances. "Quite a view," she remarked, handing him one of the cups. "Not exactly what we planned," Rourke admitted. "Few things worth doing ever go according to plan." She sipped her coffee, grimacing slightly at the taste. "The integration teams report that Odyssey survivors are adapting well. Captain Duval's leadership has been crucial. They trust her, and she trusts you." Rourke nodded absently, his mind already moving to the next challenge. "We need to establish a more permanent settlement structure. The temporary arrangements won't hold through the first storm season, whenever that comes. The first survey teams are already gathering data on local weather patterns," Karras assured him. "And the construction units are adapting the original colony designs to accommodate our new reality." "Our new reality?" Rourke echoed. 200,000 people traumatized by battle and tragedy, trying to build a civilization on a world that tried to kill us. "A world whose guardian tried to kill us," Karras corrected gently. "Solace is gone, Captain. The planet itself is just a planet, and a remarkably hospitable one at that." Rourke wasn't so sure. The battle had ended, yes. Solace's core had been destroyed, but something about this world still felt watchful, as if it were holding its breath, waiting to see what these human interlopers would do next. He pushed the thought aside. They had more immediate concerns. "The Leadership Council is meeting at midday," he said. "We need to finalize the integration plan for the Odyssey survivors and establish clear governance protocols. 5 captains making all decisions won't work long term. The people are already talking about elections, Karras noted. Once the immediate crisis is past, they'll want a say in how this new world is run. As they should, Rourke agreed. We're not a military expedition anymore, we're a society. Below them, the colony continued its frenetic activity. Transport vehicles shuttled between sites, carrying supplies and personnel. Construction teams assembled more permanent structures at the colony's core. Medical units tended to the injured, and everywhere people worked together. Vanguard crew alongside Endeavor technicians, Hope's calling engineers with New Dawn scientists, Sentinel security personnel guiding Odyssey survivors. 5 ships, 1 people, 1 future. The mountain loomed above them all, silent witness to humanity's first faltering steps on their new home. Rourke studied its slopes, trying to imagine what this valley would look like in a year, in 10 years, in a century. Would they build cities to rival those of old Earth? Would they learn from humanity's past mistakes, or repeat them on this pristine canvas? "We have a chance here," he said quietly. "A chance to do better." Karras followed his gaze to the mountain peak. "We do," she agreed, "but first we survive. Survival." It always came back to that, but perhaps Rourke thought survival alone wasn't enough. Perhaps they needed something more, a purpose beyond merely continuing to exist. "We'll build something worth the cost," he decided. For the Odyssey, for all of us. As the alien sun climbed higher in an impossibly blue sky, casting its light over the scattered remnants of humanity's last hope, Rourke allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt since the battle began. Hope. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.